I didn't realize that one dinner could change everything. We were sitting at the polished oak table, the smell of roasted chicken hanging in the air, laughter echoing faintly from a television in the living room. I thought it was just another family gathering, just another evening pretending everything was normal. But then his voice cut through the room like a blade. "You ruined everything," he shouted, eyes blazing, fists clenching at his sides. "You ruined my perfect family." I froze. Every word, every syllable slammed into me with the force of a freight train. Perfect family? What was perfect about them? I had thought we were close, that he cared, that his brother, my friend, cared. And yet here I was, accused, humiliated, my entire existence in that moment reduced to a single accusation. I tried to speak, to explain, but his anger was a wall I couldn't penetrate. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, his hands shaking with fury. Around us, the room seemed to shrink, the laughter dying, the air heavy with tension. I could feel every eye on me, some confused, some fearful, all waiting for me to crumble. And then his brother spoke, not to defend me, not to calm the storm, but to reveal a truth I wasn't prepared to hear. "Stop," he said quietly, almost impossibly calm. "You don't understand. You've been lied to your whole life." The room went silent. Every eye turned toward him, expecting an explanation, a defense, a reason for the outburst. He met my gaze first, a mix of sorrow and determination in his eyes. Then he began to speak, slowly, carefully, as if each word had been weighed 1,000 times. He revealed secrets, hidden from me, from him, from everyone. The so-called perfect family was a façade, a carefully constructed illusion masking betrayals, mistakes, and lies that had festered for years. And I, somehow, had stumbled into the truth. My crime wasn't destroying a family. It was exposing it. I remember feeling my chest tighten, the world tilting slightly as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Every fight I thought I had caused, every misunderstanding, every whispered accusation, they weren't mine to bear. They had been the consequences of deception, of secrets so carefully guarded that no one dared to speak them out loud. And yet the anger didn't vanish immediately. His fury, the screaming, the accusations, had left scars, invisible but sharp. I felt trapped between relief and fear, between understanding and resentment. The brother's confession was a key, but it unlocked more questions than answers. Why had the lies been kept for so long? Who had benefited? And most importantly, how could trust ever be rebuilt after such a revelation? The days that followed were a blur of confrontation and reflection. I found myself retracing every moment, every conversation, trying to distinguish truth from deception. I realized that the perfect image I had admired from afar was hollow, that behind the smiles and holidays, there were fractures that had never healed. And I had been caught in the middle, blamed for exposing what everyone else had been afraid to face. Yet in the midst of this chaos, there was an unexpected clarity. The brother's truth had set something in motion. It gave me insight, perspective, and eventually, a choice. To continue to bear the weight of blame, or to step out of it, reclaim my dignity, and see the family not as perfect, but as real, imperfect, flawed, human. And it was in that choice, in that recognition of reality, that the first seeds of healing were planted. Not for him, not for the facade that he had defended, but for me, for the woman who had been screamed at, accused, and nearly broken. The days after that dinner were a strange limbo. Every encounter, every glance carried the weight of the revelation. I could sense the tension lingering in the air, like a storm waiting to break again. I avoided the usual family gatherings, yet I couldn't escape the echo of that night, his voice, red with fury, and his brother's calm confession slicing through the chaos. I started piecing together fragments of memories, Small incidents that once seemed trivial, now taking on new meaning. The late-night arguments hushed when I entered the room, the whispers that fell silent at my approach, the inexplicable coldness of family members who had once been warm. It all clicked into place. Their perfect family had been an elaborate performance, and I had unknowingly stumbled onto the stage. Then came the moment that changed everything again. His brother reached out to me, not with words of apology for the chaos, but with an invitation for honesty. "Meet me," he said, "outside of all this. There's more you deserve to know." Hesitant, yet desperate for understanding, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe, the kind of place where conversations could breathe without interruption. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. "You need to understand," he began, voice low and deliberate. "Everything you thought you knew about this family, it's only a shadow of the truth. My brother, he's been carrying a burden, a lie so heavy, he convinced himself that blaming you could keep it buried." He unfolded a story I could hardly have imagined. Decades of deception, hidden financial troubles, affairs carefully masked, resentment simmering just below the surface. He told me about moments I had witnessed but misread, about people I had trusted but who had acted in secrecy. It was like watching the world turn inside out. "But why now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why reveal it all to me?" "Because someone had to," he said, his expression grave. "And you, by being yourself, by not hiding, by speaking truthfully even when it wasn't convenient, forced the cracks to show. You didn't destroy the family, you exposed it. That's all." I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Relief that I was not the villain in the story I had been living, and exhaustion at the sheer weight of truths I was now carrying. I had stepped into a world of clarity, but it was a clarity built on shattered illusions. Over the next weeks, conversations shifted. Slowly, painfully, pieces of the family began to reconnect, not as a perfect unit, but as real people confronting their failings. Some resisted, clinging to the facade, while others admitted guilt, remorse, and shame. And I chose to step back, observing, listening, holding on to my own dignity. I realized I didn't need to fix their lives. I only needed to understand mine, to reclaim the peace that had been stolen by lies. In time, the anger that had once struck me like lightning softened. I could see the brokenness behind the fury, the human flaws that no amount of perfection could mask. And while the family would never be what I had once imagined, I found something far more valuable: a sense of truth, a measure of freedom, and a knowledge that even in chaos, honesty could plant the seeds of something stronger than a perfect illusion. After weeks of reflection, the tension at home hadn't fully eased. Some family members avoided me, others stared, hesitant to speak. Yet, amidst the quiet unease, I began noticing subtle shifts, small acknowledgments, brief glances of understanding, hesitant conversations starting to surface. The truth had been revealed, but it had yet to fully settle. One evening, his brother called me unexpectedly. "There's something you need to see," he said, his voice tense yet calm. I hesitated, unsure what could be worse than the revelations I'd already endured. But curiosity, mingled with a need for closure, drew me in. We drove to a place I hadn't been before, a small, neglected house on the edge of town. Inside, the air smelled of dust and forgotten memories. He led me to a locked drawer and carefully pulled out a bundle of old letters and photographs. "These are from your past and theirs," he said. "They tell the story no one dared to tell aloud." I opened the first letter, my hands shaking. It was from his father, addressed to the family, filled with confessions, regrets, and fears that had been buried for decades. Each page was a revelation: affairs, betrayals, financial mistakes, and hidden truths that painted the perfect family in shades of reality I had never imagined. As I read, The anger I had felt at him, the shouting, the humiliation, shifted into a complex mix of sorrow, empathy, and disbelief. I realized that the blame I had carried wasn't mine to hold. It had been misplaced, redirected to protect long-hidden secrets. His brother watched me silently, waiting for my reaction. He said, "You see now. You didn't ruin anything. You only uncovered what they couldn't face themselves. And now, it's your choice how to respond." Choice. The word echoed in my mind. I could retreat, allow the weight of their lies to crush me, or I could step forward, armed with knowledge and perspective, and decide what role I would play in a family that was far from perfect, but real. I left that house with a heavy heart, yet a strange sense of empowerment. I had glimpsed the truth, and though it was painful, it was liberating. The real test would come when I returned home, when I faced the people who had hidden so much, and when I finally had to decide how far I was willing to go to reconcile honesty with forgiveness. The evening air was crisp, and I felt the first stirrings of resolve. The story was far from over. The family I thought I knew was unraveling, and I was now a part of that unraveling, not as a victim, but as a witness, a keeper of truths too long buried. And deep down, I knew that soon a confrontation awaited me, one that could either heal or break what remained. The following days were a blur of quiet observation and careful interactions. Every word spoken at the dinner table, every glance exchanged across the room, carried the weight of the newly uncovered truths. I noticed the tension in my husband's posture, the way his eyes darted away whenever I spoke, the tremor in his hands when he thought no one was watching. He was struggling, as much as I had, though his struggle was wrapped in anger and denial. Then, one evening, he approached me alone. The house was empty, the dim light casting long shadows across the living room. "We need to talk," he said, voice low yet carrying the familiar edge of authority I had come to recognize. My heart pounded, knowing this conversation could either shatter the fragile calm or begin a path toward understanding. "I know," I replied, cautiously. "I've seen the letters. I know what's been hidden. I know the truth." His eyes widened, a mixture of shock, guilt, and something else I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe? "You shouldn't have seen them," he said finally, voice cracking. "They were never meant for you. None of this was meant for you to bear." "I wasn't supposed to see the truth," I said softly, stepping closer, "but I did. And I need to know. Why keep it all hidden? Why lie for so long?" He paused, staring at the floor, the weight of years of deception pressing down on him. "Because I was scared," he admitted, voice barely a whisper. "Scared of losing control, scared of what everyone would think. I thought if I could manage the illusions, I could protect us all. But I was wrong. I see that now." For the first time, I saw vulnerability behind his anger, a man trapped by his own choices and fears. And in that moment, I realized that our confrontation wasn't just about blame. It was about acknowledgement, about facing the truth together, no matter how uncomfortable. I reached out, placing a tentative hand on his arm. "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can decide what happens next. We can rebuild, not a perfect family, but an honest one. One where we stop hiding from each other." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "I don't know if I can fix everything," he admitted, "but I want to try. I want to make things right." A fragile hope stirred between us. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with conversations long overdue, confrontations, and healing. But for the first time, the tension felt less like a wall and more like a bridge, leading somewhere we had never dared to go before. That night, I slept with a sense of anticipation. The storm wasn't over, and I knew more revelations awaited. But for the first time, I felt equipped to face them. The truth had shifted the ground beneath us, but it had also opened a path, one that promised honesty and, perhaps, a chance at real connection. The following weekend brought a family gathering unlike any before. The air was thick with unspoken words. Each member seemed to measure their movements, hesitant to speak, yet unable to ignore the simmering tension. I arrived early, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what I now carried. He was there, my husband, sitting rigidly in his chair, eyes avoiding mine. His brother gave me a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement that I wasn't alone in this. I could sense that the others were watching too, curiosity mingled with unease. Something was about to break the surface. Then it happened. A casual remark, a question asked of my husband, about finances, about the past. And just like that, the delicate calm shattered. His temper flared, not at me, not entirely, but at the inevitability of the truths emerging in public. "Enough," he barked, standing abruptly. "This family is being torn apart." I felt the room shrink around me as everyone froze. Eyes darted between us, whispering, uncertain. And yet, unlike before, I did not shrink. I met his gaze steadily. The letters, the photographs, the concessions, all of it solidifying a newfound clarity inside me. "I'm not tearing anything apart," I said, my voice clear, echoing in the tense silence. "I am speaking truth. The lies, the secrets, they've been tearing this family apart for years. I just exposed them." His brother stepped forward, supporting my words, explaining the long-hidden realities, the pressures and fears that had driven the deception. Slowly, the conversation began to shift, from blame to recognition, from anger to reluctant acknowledgement. Some family members listened, some resisted, and some avoided eye contact, unable to confront what they had known but ignored. For the first time, I saw the cracks in the perfect family not as accusations against me, but as openings, opportunities for honesty, for change, for reconciliation. The night was long, filled with sharp words, silences heavier than any shouting, and small, tentative moments of understanding. I left that gathering exhausted, but strangely empowered. The confrontation hadn't solved everything, far from it, yet the first steps toward truth had been taken. I realized that healing wouldn't come from erasing the past, it would come from facing it, together, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable. And as I walked to my car, the cold night air brushing against my face, I felt the first real sense of possibility. The family I had once admired from a distance was broken, yes, but now perhaps it could also become something real, something honest. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Some family members began to approach me with quiet apologies, hesitant questions, or small gestures of acknowledgement. Others still resisted, clinging to the past, unable or unwilling to face the truths that had come to light. Every interaction was a test of patience, of understanding, and of the fragile trust that was slowly being rebuilt. One afternoon, I found myself alone with his brother again. "They're listening," he said quietly, "but it's going to take time. Some of them want change, some of them fear it. And your husband, he's still struggling with his pride and anger. It's not just about forgiveness, it's about accepting responsibility." I nodded, understanding the magnitude of what lay ahead. This wasn't just about exposing lies, it was about creating space for truth, for accountability, and for growth. And yet, as I resolved to move forward, I felt the lingering shadows of resentment, the unspoken words, the old wounds, and the fear of future confrontations. Then came the turning point. During another family dinner, tensions flared unexpectedly. A minor disagreement erupted, but instead of chaos, I noticed a subtle shift. The anger was tempered by reflection. His brother intervened calmly, guiding the conversation toward honesty rather than blame. And for the first time, my husband hesitated before raising his voice. as if the weight of his own truths was finally beginning to settle. I watched him, the man who had once screamed at me, now visibly wrestling with himself. And in that struggle, I saw a glimmer of change, real, human, imperfect, but genuine. I realized that healing wouldn't be sudden or perfect. It would be slow, uncomfortable, and often painful. But it was possible. As the evening ended, a quiet sense of relief settled over me. I wasn't responsible for fixing the family, nor could I force anyone to accept the truth. My role was simpler, yet profound: to hold space for honesty, to speak when necessary, and to protect my own dignity amidst the storm of revelations. Walking home that night, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. The family was far from whole, but cracks had appeared in the walls of deception. And for the first time in a long while, I believed that perhaps, just perhaps, some of those cracks could become pathways, not just for forgiveness, but for real understanding. Weeks passed, and the fragile threads of honesty began to stretch, but not yet fully mend. The house felt different, heavier in some moments, lighter in others. Conversations were cautious, silences spoke as loudly as words. I noticed small gestures: his brother offering a quiet smile across the table, my husband lingering near me with an unspoken apology. But the tension remained, a reminder that nothing could be undone overnight. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the kitchen with him. The air was thick with unspoken questions. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Everything I thought I knew, everything I built, it's all crumbling, and I don't know what to do next." I took a deep breath. "No one is asking you to fix everything," I said carefully. "What matters is that you face it. Face the truth, face the mistakes, and, most importantly, face yourself. That's the only way anything can change." He looked at me, a mixture of guilt, fear, and something else, maybe understanding, flickering in his eyes. "And if I can't?" he asked quietly. "Then you try anyway. Change doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments, in choices, in small steps that lead somewhere new. You've already taken the first ones." Later that evening, as I walked through the quiet house, I felt the weight of everything: the anger, the lies, the revelations, but also a strange sense of anticipation. The family was at a crossroads, caught between the comfort of old illusions and the difficult path of honesty. I knew there would be more confrontations, more truths unearthed, and more moments where the past threatened to pull us all back into chaos. And yet, amidst the uncertainty, I felt a growing resilience within myself. I had seen the cracks, I had faced the truths, and I had chosen not to crumble under their weight. The story wasn't over, but I was no longer merely a witness. I was a participant, ready to navigate the storm, ready to confront what remained hidden, and ready to discover what could emerge from the fragments of a family learning, slowly, to be real. The next few days were filled with quiet unease and fleeting moments of connection. Some family members were tentative, unsure of how to navigate this new reality. Others seemed almost paralyzed by the truths that had surfaced. I could feel the weight of expectation pressing down on me, everyone watching, waiting to see how I would respond to the next revelation, the next confrontation. One evening, I found myself once again alone with his brother. "You've changed something," he said quietly, almost to himself. "They're all watching now, waiting to see what you'll do, and he's terrified, terrified of what's coming." I frowned. "What do you mean? What's coming?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "More truths, things that have been buried longer than even we realized, secrets that could shatter what's left of their pride, and possibly yours if you're not ready." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had thought I was prepared, but the idea of more revelations, more confrontations, was daunting. And yet, there was also a strange sense of clarity. I had faced anger, lies, and betrayal before. I could face more. I had no illusions of perfection, only of survival, understanding, and perhaps eventual reconciliation. The next day brought a subtle shift in the household. Conversations became sharper, glances more meaningful, and old tensions resurfaced with a sharper edge. My husband's pride clashed with the truths he now could not deny. Other family members whispered behind closed doors, their uncertainty palpable. And then, unexpectedly, a small breakthrough occurred. A distant relative, who had remained silent for decades, approached me with an apology and a confession of their own. It was a minor revelation compared to the storms we had already weathered, but it sent a ripple through the household. The walls that had seemed impenetrable began to quiver. I realized then that the path ahead would not be a single confrontation or a moment of clarity. It would be a series of small shifts, choices, and revelations. And though the final storm had not yet arrived, I felt a strange readiness, a preparedness to face whatever truths were still hidden, to confront them with honesty, and to navigate the fragile threads of this family as they continued to unravel. For the first time, I understood that the story was no longer just theirs or mine. It was something we were all living together, moment by moment, revelation by revelation, choice by choice. The following week felt like walking on a tightrope. Every interaction was measured, every word weighed. I could sense the anticipation, the unspoken tension thickening the air. It wasn't just me. Everyone in the house seemed to carry a fragile awareness that something monumental was about to unfold. One evening, my husband approached me in the quiet of the living room. His face was pale, eyes restless. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," he admitted, voice low and strained. "Every day, it's like I'm fighting myself, and I don't know if I can win." "I understand," I replied, choosing my words carefully. "But you don't have to fight alone anymore. You can face it, all of it, the truth, the mistakes, everything. And maybe then we can start to make sense of it together." He stared at me, a mixture of fear, guilt, and a flicker of hope passing across his features. "And if I fail," he whispered, "then we try again and again until we find a way forward. Nothing worth fixing comes easily." The next days were punctuated by subtle but meaningful shifts. Conversations with other family members became slightly more open. Old grudges surfaced, but were met with cautious attempts at dialogue rather than silence or deflection. Small gestures, an unexpected smile, a shared glance, a quiet apology marked tentative progress. Yet not everything was smooth. A particularly heated argument erupted one afternoon over past mistakes. Accusations flew, voices rose, and for a moment it felt like the fragile thread holding us together might snap. But instead of chaos, I noticed a shift. The anger was tempered, the words more honest, more vulnerable. People were beginning to speak not to defend illusions, but to acknowledge reality. That night, I walked through the empty house, the quiet heavy with the weight of what had been revealed and what was still to come. I realized that the real challenge lay not in uncovering secrets, but in living with them, in navigating the fragile balance between truth and forgiveness. I understood then that the final confrontation, when it came, would not just test the family, but also test me. It would demand courage, clarity, and resilience. And deep down, I felt a growing determination to face it head on, to stand firm in truth, and to discover what could emerge from the ashes of long-buried lies. The storm was approaching, and I was ready. The days that followed were charged with a tension that seemed almost tangible. Every look, every word, every gesture carried the weight of expectation. The family was on edge, as if waiting for a spark that would either ignite complete collapse or begin a long overdue reconciliation. One evening, an argument erupted over something seemingly trivial, a misplaced document, a misunderstood comment, but it quickly escalated. Voices rose, faces flushed with anger and frustration, and I felt the room contracting around us, the air thick with years of suppressed resentment. I realized then that this was it, the moment where the illusions, lies, and hidden truths could no longer coexist with pretense. The fragile facade of perfection was cracking, revealing raw human emotion beneath. My husband shouted, his anger laced with guilt and fear, while his brother tried to mediate, urging honesty and calm. I stood quietly, observing, feeling the immense weight of everything I had uncovered. The letters, the confessions, the hidden betrayals, they had led us to this moment. And now it wasn't just about who was right or wrong, it was about confronting the reality of who we were together. A sudden silence fell as someone, my husband, perhaps his brother, perhaps me, spoke with a clarity that cut through the tension. "Stop hiding behind anger and blame," the voice said. "We've all been complicit. We've all carried pieces of this story, and it's time to face it fully." The room held its breath. Eyes met, hands trembled, and hearts pounded. I could see the internal battles raging in each person. Fear, guilt, shame, but also the glimmer of recognition, of possibility. In that charged moment, I realized the truth. The final confrontation wouldn't be a single explosion of emotion, but a series of choices. Each person would have to decide whether to cling to the past, to protect illusions, or to step into the uncomfortable light of honesty. And my role as someone who had once been blamed for destroying it all was no longer to shrink or hide. I was now a participant, a witness, and a guide, ready to face whatever revelations were still hidden, ready to confront them with courage, and ready to navigate the fragile path toward real connection. The storm had arrived, but whether it would wash us clean or sweep everything away remained to be seen. The days following the eruption of anger were heavy with anticipation. Each family member moved cautiously, words measured, glances loaded with unspoken thoughts. The house seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that the culmination of all these revelations was near. One evening, my husband confronted me again. His voice was quieter than before, but sharper, tinged with both regret and defiance. "I still don't understand why you had to uncover all of this," he said, pacing the room. "Why couldn't we have stayed as we were?" I looked at him steadily. "Because what we were wasn't real," I said. "Pretending doesn't protect anyone. It only prolongs the pain. You've built walls around your fears, but I've seen the truth, and it's time to stop hiding." His hands shook as he ran them through his hair. "And what now? How do we even begin to repair this?" "That's the choice you all have to make. No one can force it. You have to want it. You have to face what's been hidden, accept it, and decide what kind of family you want to be. Imperfect, yes, but real." The tension in the room was almost unbearable. Every eye was on us, every silence screaming. Some family members avoided my gaze, others stared openly, waiting, judging. I could feel the history of lies pressing down like a physical weight, and yet beneath it all, a fragile glimmer of hope remained. That night I walked alone through the quiet house, the echoes of past arguments still lingering in the walls. I realized that the coming days would demand courage from everyone, not just from my husband or his brother, but from me, and from every person tied to this web of secrets. The storm was far from over. There would be more revelations, more confrontations, more moments where everything could collapse or begin to heal. And as I felt the first stirrings of determination within me, I knew one thing for certain. I would face it all. With truth, with honesty, and with the unshakable understanding that even amidst chaos, real connection could still emerge,
if we were willing to reach for it. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to walk it. And deep down, I sensed that the most pivotal moment, the one that would define us all, was closer than anyone imagined.
The next family gathering was unlike any before. The air was thick with anticipation, and every person seemed to move with caution, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The past, with all its hidden truths and long-buried resentment, had finally caught up with us. It started with a question, a simple, almost casual remark about the past, but it quickly escalated. Accusations flew, voices rose, and the room became a battleground of emotions. My husband's anger resurfaced, sharp and untempered, yet beneath it I could sense fear and shame. His brother tried to mediate, his voice calm but firm, urging honesty and reflection. I stood quietly, feeling the full weight of everything I had learned. The letters, the confessions, the betrayals, they had all led to this moment. And now, it wasn't just about blame anymore. It was about confronting reality, fully and unflinchingly. "You've all hidden too much for too long," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. "Pretending doesn't protect anyone. Facing the truth does. And if we want to survive this family, we have to be honest with each other. No excuses, no lies, no hiding." For a moment, the room fell silent. Eyes met eyes, hearts pounded, and I could feel the internal battles raging within each person. Pride clashing with guilt, fear confronting responsibility. It was raw, unfiltered, and intense. Then, one by one, confessions began to surface. Small truths at first, minor lies, hidden feelings, suppressed anger. But soon, deeper revelations emerged, shaking the foundation of the family. Secrets long buried were brought into the light, forcing each of us to reckon with the reality we had ignored for years. I realized then that the story was no longer mine or theirs alone. It belonged to all of us. Each choice, each confession, each acknowledgement shaped the path forward. And while nothing was resolved yet, the moment had arrived where the direction of everything depended on courage, honesty, and the willingness to confront the pain head on. I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. The storm had hit, and we were at its center. What came next would define not only the family, but the very nature of truth, trust, and connection within it. And deep down, I knew that the final revelations were still to come, waiting to test us all. The days after that gathering were heavy, charged with a tension that seemed almost alive. Every glance, every word, every silence carried weight. The family was now caught in a delicate balance between revelation and denial, truth and fear, confrontation and retreat. One evening, I found myself sitting across from my husband in the dimly lit living room. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock. "I've never realized how deep it all ran," he admitted, voice low and strained. "All these years, the lies, the secrets, I thought I was protecting everyone, but I see now I was just protecting myself from facing reality." "You can't change the past," I said softly, "but you can choose how to live with the truth. You can face it, own it, and decide what kind of family we want to be from now on." He looked away, struggling, his pride warring with the vulnerability I had rarely seen. "And if I fail," he whispered, almost to himself, "then you try again," I said, holding his gaze. Because honesty and connection are worth fighting for. No matter how hard, no matter how painful, it's the only way forward. The next few days were a mix of small victories and setbacks. Some family members began to speak more openly, admitting mistakes, acknowledging feelings, or offering apologies. Others still recoiled, clinging to the old illusions,
afraid of the truths now exposed. But even in the tension, there was movement, a slow, painful shift toward honesty. Then came a quiet moment that caught me off guard. His brother approached me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've changed the course of all of this," he said, voice soft but firm. "Your courage forced them to see what they couldn't face alone. And even now, as the storm continues, you've given everyone a chance, an opportunity to choose honesty over fear." I felt a mix of exhaustion, relief, and anticipation. The confrontation, the revelations, the emotional storms, they weren't over. But the family was now standing on the edge of something new, a fragile, imperfect chance at real connection. And deep down, I knew that the final moments, the true reckoning, the ultimate resolution, were still ahead. The path to truth and reconciliation was not over, but for the first time, I felt ready to walk it to the very end. The day of the final confrontation arrived, though no one knew exactly what form it would take. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on you, demanding attention. Every family member carried the weight of the truths revealed, and for the first time, I felt the room ready to face what had been hidden for decades. We gathered in the living room, the air thick with anticipation. My husband sat across from me, his expression conflicted. Anger still flickered in his eyes, but there was also a glimmer of understanding, a willingness to confront the truth rather than hide behind it. His brother stood beside him, calm and steady, a silent anchor in the storm. I have a lot to say," my husband began, voice trembling. "For years, I've blamed others to shield myself. I've hidden mistakes, lied to protect an illusion of perfection, and in doing so, I've hurt the people I love most, including you." The words hung in the air, heavy but liberating. I saw the faces of the other family members soften, some with tears, others with reluctant acknowledgement. The dam of unspoken resentment and fear had begun to break. I'm not perfect, and this family isn't perfect, but we have a choice. We can continue pretending, or we can face each other honestly and start rebuilding. I want to try. I need to try, and I hope we can do it together. A ripple of quiet agreement passed through the room. Slowly, one by one, apologies were spoken, confessions were shared, and emotions long buried were allowed to surface. It wasn't easy, it wasn't painful, but with each word, the walls of pretense crumbled, replaced by something raw, human, and real. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger, the blame, the fear, they no longer controlled the narrative. The family that had once seemed impossible to reach was beginning to breathe, to speak, to connect. Imperfectly, yes, but truly. When the night ended, we all sat together in quiet reflection. I looked around, seeing not the perfect image I had once admired, but the real people who had finally chosen truth over illusion. And in that moment, I understood that the hardest part wasn't uncovering the secrets. It was facing them, together, and choosing to move forward. I left the living room that night with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The storm had passed, leaving behind fragments of the past, but also the possibility of something stronger, something genuine. The family would never be flawless, but for the first time, it could be honest. And I knew, finally, that honesty, even when it shatters illusions, can be the most powerful form of love.